Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Chandigarh Judicial Academy by Honorable Mr. Justice Arvind Singh Sangwan. I am your host. My name is Sanjay Kapoor. I am from SCC Online. We are privileged and honored to have Honorable Mr. Justice Sangwan with us today. His Lordship did his graduation from Dayal Singh College, Karnal, and after doing his LLB from Kurukshetra University in 1984, His Lordship started practice at District Court of Kurukshetra on civil and revenue side under the able and worthy guidance of his father, late Shri Chandramani, who was also one of the top leading civil lawyer. In practice, His Lordship handled several types of civil suits, civil appeals, MSCT and land acquisition cases, and criminal trials as well. After his appointment as an Assistant Advocate General in Haryana in 1989, His Lordship moved to Punjab and Haryana High Court at Chandigarh, and later he became Deputy Advocate General in 1990. In March 1991, His Lordship resumed private practice in civil, revenue, and criminal side, and while in practice, he handled more than 200 cases every year. He was also standing counsel for the state Haryana Election Commission and other boards and government institutions and educational institutions, and represented several Panchayati Raj institutions of Haryana. His Lordship contested several important civil and criminal cases, writ petitions pertaining to service, cooperative and revenue cases and appeals arising out of motor accident, matrimonial and land acquisition cases. His Lordship's father was also an active social worker and was founder member of two DAV educational institutions and an orphanage at Karnal. His Lordship was elevated as additional judge of Punjab and Haryana High Court on 10th of July 2000. His Negotiable Instrument Act, Section 131 will be detailed by Honorable, and part 2 will be Q&A, question and answer, which will be starting after 40 minutes of the first session. We will now most humbly request the Honorable Lordship to start the session. Honorable Lordship.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry for the delay due to some technical edge. Today's topic, as you know, is on the Negotiable Instrument Act with focus on Section 138 of the Negotiable Instrument Act. In fact, it should be 138 rather than Section 141. Before starting the session, I would like to refer some other provisions regarding the civil liability under the Act, because there are, if you look into the definition of the negotiable instrument, it contains three things. One is a promissory note, the second is a bill of exchange, and the third is the check. The prosecution under Chapter 18, which has been introduced in 1988, is primarily with regard to the provisions of dishonoring of check by an individual or by a company, whereas with regard to the bill of exchange or a promissory note, the right of a person lies with the civil court. Now, primarily, as the time is, we have lost some time, so I will not go into the history or the academic part of the Negotiable Instrument Act, and we will start straightway to the three provisions relating to the promissory note, bill of exchange, and the check. Now, first of all, if you see Section 4 of the Act, it provides that the definition of a promissory note, which says that promissory note is an instrument in writing, not being a bank note or a currency note, containing an unconditional undertaking signed by the maker to pay a certain sum of money to or to the order of a certain person or to the bearer of the instrument. So the essential elements of a promissory note are that it should be in writing. There should be a specific expression of promise or clear understanding to pay, and such understanding should be unconditional. This written document should be signed by the maker of such document, and the term and condition should be clear and certain. Now, further section 5 defines bill of exchange as an instrument in writing containing an unconditional order signed by the maker directing a certain person to pay a certain amount of money only to and in order of a certain person or the bearer of the instrument. Now, the basic difference between the bill of exchange and the promissory note is that in a case of promissory note, it is between the two parties, that is the maker, the debtor, or the pay, the creditor. Whereas in the case of bill of exchange, there can be three parties: the drawer, the drawee, or the pay. And though the agreement is between the two of them, but a third party can also endorse the liability. The second difference is the payment is to be made to the maker. In a case of a promissory note, the payment cannot be made by the maker himself, while in a bill of exchange, to the drawer or a payee or a drawee, the payment should be by the same person. The third difference is unconditional promise. In both the cases, there has to be unconditional promise of payment. And further difference is prior acceptance. When a note is presented for payment without any prior acceptance by the maker, a bill of exchange is payable by the sign after it should be accepted by the drawer or some other person before, or it can be presented for payment. The another difference is primary and absolute liability. The liability of a maker in case of a promissory note is primary and absolute, but the liability in case of a drawer of a bill of exchange is secondary and conditional, because in case of a bill of exchange, there can be more than two parties. Now, coming to check, section 6 define a check is a bill of exchange drawn on a specified banker and not expressed to be payable otherwise than on demand. So the first condition of a check is that it is a bill of exchange, and there are two more qualifications for the same, that it is drawn on a specified banker, and secondly that it is payable on demand. So the distinction between bill of exchange and a check in relation to two parties, wherein section 138 of the Negotiable Instrument Act will apply, is that a bill of exchange is usually drawn on some person or a firm, whereas a check is always drawn on a bank. The second essential is that the bill of exchange must be accepted before the payment is made, but a check does not amount any requirement of such acceptance. Now I'm referring to the difference between these two is that the liability under the bill of exchange or a promissory note is a civil liability primarily, unless a person claims it to be an outcome of fraud where he can sue the other party under section 415 or 420 of IPC, as the case was in case of check also prior to the amendment in 1988 when chapter 18 was introduced under the Negotiable Instrument Act. The third difference is the some 3 days grace period is sometimes allowed in case of time bills, whereas no grace period is given in case of a check. And the drawer of a bill is discharged from its liability if not presented for payment, but the drawer of a check is discharged only if he suffers any damage by delay in presenting the check for payment. So these are the basic difference between the three documents and the liability and the rights of a person who is to claim anything out of these three documents. Now, the parties to a Negotiable Instrument Act, it may be a promissory note, it may be a bill of exchange or a check, are firstly there should be a drawer who makes the bill of exchange, a drawee, a person who is directed to make the money by the drawer is or acceptor, a person who accepts the bill by signing it and giving his consent for the same, the pay, a person who is a party to the instrument who has to make the payment, and endorser and endorsees, the persons who are party to a bill of exchange where the holder transfer or endorse the instrument to a third person, wherein he becomes an endorser of the same, and endorsee is a person to whom the bill is endorsed. Now, in ordinary case, a holder will be a person who is legally entitled to the possession of a Negotiable Instrument Act, either in his own name or to receive the amount wherein he may be called as a holder. Now, in case of a check, the holder can be a person who holds the check in his own name and he cannot transfer it in the name of some other person, whereas it can be in the case of bill of exchange or note. So the parties to a promissory note would be maker, payee, and the holder of a check, holder of a promissory note, and a party to a check will be drawee and the drawer and the person who is to make the payment. Now there are certain provisions under section 43 to 45 of the Negotiable Instrument Act, which deals with the consideration, but I will skip for that because these are not so relevant for the purpose of the dispute regarding arising out of the litigation, because in litigation we have to deal either on civil side or under the criminal side. The civil side is very clear. The right of a person under a promissory note or under a bill of exchange can be executed or can be enforced by way of filing a civil suit. Now coming to the chapter 18, which was introduced in 1988, wherein provisions of section 138 to 142 were added, giving some right and putting some liability in case of dishonor of check. First is section 138, which provides that where a check is drawn by a person on an account maintained by him with a banker, which is the first condition of a check, that the account should be maintained with a banker, of a money which is payable to other person from out of the account for discharge in whole or part of any debt or liability. Now debt or liability is further explained as per the explanation is a legally enforceable debt or a legally enforceable liability. It further provides that either because money standing in the credit of the account is insufficient to the holder of the check, or that it exceeds the arrangement made within the bank, such person shall be deemed to have committed an offence and without prejudice to any provisions of the act be punished with imprisonment for a period of 2 years or fine which may extend to twice the amount of the check, or with both, providing that nothing contained in the section shall apply to a check presented with the bank within a period of 6 months, that is the period of validity of a check, and the payee or the holder in due course of the check, as the case may be, makes a demand of the payment of dishonoring of the check within a period of 30 days, that is the period provided for issuance of a legal notice, and the drawer of such checks fail to make payment of the said amount to the payee, as the case may be, in the holder of due course of the check within 15 days of the receipt of the notice, that is the period provided for making the payment after a person who is liable to make the payment has received the legal notice but failed to make the check, and then the complaint would lie. Now I will be referring to certain latest judgments on this point, wherein the provisions of section 138 of this chapter, 138, 139, 141 and 142 are relevant, but before that I would like to refer the provisions of section 141 with regard to the liability. 138 primarily deals with the liability of an individual and 141 deals with the offences by the companies. Now 141 would, while referring to section 141, the primary interpretation deals with the liability of the company and the person who are in charge of the conduct of the business of the company. So clause 1 provides that if a person committing an offence under section 138 is a company, so the first condition is that the offence committed by a company under section 138, then provisions of section 141 will apply. Every person who at the time of the offence was committed was in charge of or was responsible for the company for conduct of the business of the company, as well as the company shall be deemed to be guilty of offences and shall be liable to be proceeded against and punished accordingly. Provided that nothing contained in the subsection shall render any person liable to punishment if he proves that the offence was committed without his knowledge or that he has exercised all his due diligence to prevent the commission of such offence. Clause 2 is also relevant, which provides that where a person is nominated as a director of a company by virtue of his holding any office or employment of the central government or state government or a financial corporation or a controlled by the central government, as the case may be, he shall not be liable for prosecution under this chapter. This is the exception clause to subclause 1. Section 2 of section 142 provides that notwithstanding anything contained in subsection 1, where any offence under the act has been committed by a company and it is proved that the offence has been committed with the consent or connivance or is attributable to any neglect on the part of any director, manager, secretary, or any officer of the company, such director, manager, secretary, or the officer shall be deemed to be guilty of that offence and shall be liable to be proceeded against and punished accordingly. Now, I will be referring to one recent judgment on the interpretation of section 141, wherein the Honorable Supreme Court has, with reference to the provisions of the IRB judgment. Yes. Now, this is a judgment you must have gone. This has come in 2020, volume 4, Supreme Court cases, page 695. Makwana Mangaldas Tulsidas versus State of Gujarat. In this case, the Honorable Supreme Court has held that with reference to the provisions of section 14 of the, not this judgment, just a minute. Single judgment की IRB वाला. This is the judgment. Sorry, this is the judgment of 2021 Supreme Court cases online, page 152. This is P. Mohan Raj versus Shah Brothers. The Honorable Supreme Court in this case has considered number of previous judgments and has overruled some of the judgment. One of the judgment which is relied upon in number of cases was Anita Hada, Shivratan Agarwal, and CV Parekh. These judgments have been partly overruled by the Honorable Supreme Court in terms of section 14 of the interim section 14 of the this IRB code, wherein some interim resolution professional order has been passed prohibiting an institution of suit or the prosecution. I would just like to refer paragraph 59 of this judgment, and I would read the conclusion part also, because this is a recent judgment and this covers a lot of things about the liability of a company and the directors. In view of the analysis, we arrive at an irresistible conclusion that the maintaining of prosecution under section 141 of the Negotiable Instrument Act, arranging of a company as a accused, is imperative. The other categories of offences can only be brought in the dragnet of the touchstone of the vicarious liability, as the same has been stipulated in the provision itself. We say no to the basis of the ratio laid down in CV Prakash. Thus, the view expressed in Shivratan Agarwal does not correctly lay down the law, and accordingly it is overruled. The decision in Anita Hada case is also overruled with the qualifier that it's as stated in para 51. Further, it has been held. Now the question which arises, which was before the Honorable Supreme Court, was that if an order is passed under section 14 appointing an IRB, whether the liability of a company or the individual liability of a natural person is covered by section 14 of the IBC code. So it was observed that since the corporate debtor would be covered by the moratorium provision contained in section 14 of the IBC, by which continuation of section 138/141 proceedings against the corporate debtor and initiation of section 138/140 proceedings against the said debtor during the corporate insolvency resolution process are interdicted, which is stated in paragraph 51 and 59 of Anita Hada's case, would become applicable. The legal impediment contained in section 14 of the IBC would be would make it impossible for such proceedings to continue or to be instituted against a corporate debtor. So the first interpretation which has been made by the Honorable Supreme Court is that if the proceedings under Section 14 have been initiated in IBC, no complaint under Section 138 or 141 against a corporate debtor will lie, but with a rider. Thus, for the period of moratorium, since no Section 138 or 140 proceedings can continue or to be initiated against corporate debtor because of a statutory bar, such proceedings can be initiated or continued against the person mentioned in Section 141 and subsection 1 and 2 of the Negotiable Instrument Act. Now, the persons mentioned in Section 141, subsection 1 and 2 are the directors who are the person in charge to the day-to-day business of a company. Now, with regard to that, the Honorable Supreme Court has clarified that, I'll read it again. Thus, for the period of moratorium, since no Section 138 or 141 proceeding can continue or to be initiated against corporate debtor because of a statutory bar, under such proceedings can be initiated or continued against the person mentioned in Section 141 and subsection 1 and 2 of the Negotiable Instrument Act. This being the case, it is clear that the moratorium provisions contained in Section 14 of IBC would apply only to the corporate debtor. The natural persons mentioned in Section 141 continue to be statutorily liable under Chapter 17 of the Negotiable Instrument Act. I'm sorry, I was referred to as Chapter 18. It is Chapter 17. Now, this interpretation make it clear that a corporate debtor, a company, cannot be held liable if an order under Section 14 has been passed, but as per provisions of subsection 1 and 2 of Section 141, the directors can be held liable. Now, with regard to the conclusion part, it has been held in this case that since the moratorium period was over, so the criminal prosecution will continue. It is further interpreted in another part of the judgment that where the IBC proceedings are initiated subsequent to filing of a complaint under Section 138 and 141, then the proceedings will continue. So the net conclusion of this judgment is that if IRB professional has been appointed under Section 114 of the IBC and the prosecution under the Negotiable Instrument Act starts later on, then it will be barred against a corporate debtor, but subject to subsection 1 and 2 of 141, it will continue against a private person. So this is the basic provisions of Section 141. I'll refer to one or two judgments also on this point regarding liability of the directors. There are a number of judgments you must have gone through where a check is issued from joint account of a company and the company is not arrayed as an accused, then the individual liability will not be there. This has also been held recently by the Honorable Supreme Court in 2021 Supreme Court Cases Online, page 189, in case of Alka Khandu versus Amar Shyam Prasad. Similar is the situation in another case of Gunmala Sales Private Limited versus Anu Mehta, wherein the vicarious liability under Section 138 and 141 of the Negotiable Instrument Act has been discussed. Now, the proceedings under the Negotiable Instrument Act are criminal in nature, but the word vicarious liability you will not find normally under the IPC or under any other criminal prosecution, wherein the economic offences, except for the economic offences, but vicarious liability under the Negotiable Instrument Act is held in provisions of Section 141 of the Negotiable Instrument Act with regard to the directors who are the signatory of the check or who are responsible for the day-to-day business of the company, and will not apply to a director who has resigned prior to the cause of accruance of the cause of action. Now, this will be a debatable issue. What will be the date of issuance of a cause of action? In some cases, the checks are issued in advance. At that time, a director may be active director, but subsequently, when the check is presented, he may have resigned, knowingly that the liability, the company liability is going to he's going to face the criminal prosecution. So these are the things which has to be seen during the course of trial, and it will be a part of evidence. So the vicarious liability of a director who is in charge of the day-to-day business is liable under section 141, subsection 1 and 2, as held by the Honorable Supreme Court in the other recent judgment. Similar is the situation in case of A.R. Radhakrishnan versus Dasari. This is 2019 judgment, where on a similar point. Another judgment is of 2019. I'm referring to all the judgments of the Honorable Supreme Court just to show that in the year 2019, 20 and 21, this is the consistent view of the Honorable Supreme Court, that where a check is signed by the director who is day-to-day in charge of the running of the business of the company, then he is liable for the same. But in exception 1 or 2 cases, the exception is when a check is signed by the director who is not liable from his personal account, or who is not liable for his individual liability, then the liability, then he cannot be prosecuted. And on that point, there are a number of judgments. Now, in another judgment with regard to section 141 of the Negotiable Instrument Act, the Honorable Supreme Court, with reference to section 68 of the Foreign Exchange Regulation Act, wherein similar provisions have been provided as per section 141 of the Negotiable Instrument Act, it has been held in 2020, volume 6, Supreme Court cases, page 561, Shailendra Swarup versus Deputy Director Enforcement, that since the provisions of section 141 of the Negotiable Instrument Act and 68 of the FERA Act are pari materia to each other, then therefore the director who is in charge and responsible to the company is liable for prosecution under both the acts. So a director who is a sleeping partner, or a director who is not responsible for day-to-day business cannot be held liable for the same. So another judgment on this point is G. Ramesh versus Kanike Harish. This is of 2019, and Shailendra Swarup versus Deputy Director Enforcement of Directorate. This is also 2020 judgment by the Honorable Supreme Court. Now coming to section 138. Of the Negotiable Instrument Act. It applies to an individual who has issued a check, and the check has been bounced for the reasons given in the Act itself, either for the amount of the money exceed to the credit of the account, or it exceeds the amount arranged to be paid from the account of an agreement made with the bank. Now, in order to prove the liability, there is a presumption under section 118 and 139 of the Negotiable Instrument Act that holder of a check a person who can file a complaint and need not to prove that the check was issued in discharge of a debt or a liability which is legally enforceable. As I said earlier, if you have, in case of other Negotiable Instrument Act, while filing a suit, a plaintiff has to prove that the debt was on account of some particular person, and further to prove that the debt was advanced. In a civil suit, one has to prove the account books, the cash books, by way of production of the same, as the primary onus is on the plaintiff to prove these things, whereas in the case of a Negotiable Instrument Act, the presumption lies in favor of the holder of the check, and this has been interpreted by the Honorable Supreme Court vis-a-vis the liability under the civil suit and the production and under section 138 of the Negotiable Instrument Act in a recent judgment, that is 2020 judgment, D.K. Chandel versus Master Wockhardt Limited. The Honorable Supreme Court has said that the production of account books and cash book may be relevant in a civil court, but these are not so in criminal complaint filed under section 138 of the Act, as there is a presumption raised in favor of the holder of the check. Now there are some judgments that the presumption under section 138 of the Negotiable Instrument can be rebutted provided the check amount reflects a loan which has been given in cash by the complainant or the holder of the check, and in that event the complainant has to prove his financial capacity where the huge loan is given in cash. And on this point, there are certain recent judgments by the Honorable Supreme Court interpreting that the onus will shift on the complainant to prove that how he has made the payment of loan. One judgment is Basing Langappa versus Modi Basappa, that is of 2019, in which the Honorable Supreme Court, in case of a loan of 8 lakh rupees, has held that there is a possibility that the presumption under Section 139 of the Negotiable Instrument Act, that with Section 118, is rebuttable, because it is for the complainant to prove that how and from which source he has acquired such a huge amount and which is paid in cash to the accused. Similar is the situation in another recent judgment, 2020, volume 12, Supreme Court cases, pages 24, APS Forex Services Private Limited and Shakti International. Again, on the same point, that once a loan is given by cash and the defense is taken that the complainant has no such financial capacity to raise such a huge loan, then the presumption in favor of the holder is rebutted and the onus shift on the complainant to prove that how he has made the payment in cash of such a huge amount. Now, with regard to the amendment which has recently been made in 2018, by which two sections 143A and 148 of the Negotiable Instrument Act were introduced, by which it is provided that 20% of the check amount can be directed by the court to be paid to the complainant. If you look into the provisions of Section 143A, it provides that after filing of a complaint, an application can be given to the court that 20% of the amount be released in favor of the complainant. And similar is a provision under Section 148 during the pendency of the appeal, where an amount of 25% of compensation can be awarded by the court. Now, the validity of these sections with regard to its prospective or retrospective effect was challenged before the Honorable Supreme Court in a case of Surinder Singh Deswal versus Virendra Gandhi. That is a 2020 judgment by the Honorable Supreme Court, in which the Honorable Supreme Court held that Section 148 will apply retrospectively to the pending cases, but in case of Section 143A, it will apply with effect from the date of amendment, that is 1st of September 2018. Now, this question was already there in one judgment of the Honorable Supreme Court, which was of 2010, Damodar S. Prabhu versus Syed Babu Lal, where the Supreme Court, while in dealing with the case of compromise, has directed that the party should pay additional amount towards the cost. But now recently, in view of the provisions of Section 148 and 143, there are certain judgments by the Honorable Supreme Court which says that this condition as per Damodar as Prabhu can be diluted if the matter has been compromised before the Mediation and Conciliation Center, that is the out of court settlement. And this one judgment on this point is Ritesh Ajmera versus Dainik Bhaskar. This is of 2019, where the Honorable Supreme Court observed that since the parties have amicably settled the matter at a stage of issuance of summons, there is no need to impose cost as per the guidelines laid down in Damodar S. Prabhu case. So, the amendment under Section 148 and 143 of directing the deposit of amount is held to be directory in nature in another judgment of 2019, and it has been left open for the court or the appellate court to decide as to how this amount is to be paid, and it is held to be not mandatory in nature. Now there are certain defenses which can be taken during the course of a trial. One of the defenses that the check was issued in case of as a security check. The Honorable Supreme Court has held that in case such a plea is taken and is not proved, then no benefit can be given to the accused person. Another defense is that in some cases where a notice after dishonor of a check is given with regard to the total amount of a loan, say in a given case the loan amount was 1 lakh rupees, but the check was given for 50,000 rupees. The legal notice was given for the entire amount of 1 lakh rupees. The Supreme Court has said that no, it cannot be done. The check can be only with regard to the notice can be issued only with regard to the check amount. Another defense which was taken in a case of an agreement to sell was whether a check issued in pursuant to and performance of an agreement to sell and is dishonored by the court, can it be enforced? The interpretation made by the Honorable Supreme Court in judgment of in 2020, in case of Ripudaman Singh versus Balkrishna, it has been interpreted that if the check is given in pursuant to an agreement to sell, which has been partly complied with, then the complaint would lie. In this case, in pursuant to the agreement to sell, the possession was offered and it was given to the party and who has issued the check. So the Supreme Court says that yes, the complaint was maintainable. However, in another judgment, it was held that once the agreement to sell is not complied, is not partly acted upon, possession is not given, or where is a defect of title of the person selling it, then the complaint will not be maintainable. So the basic principles under section 138 and 141 are that there is a presumption of in favor of the holder of the check, which is rebuttable, and it can be made with reference to the evidence of the prosecution as well as of the defense. Accused need not to lead defense evidence. He can make out from the prosecution evidence itself if there is any flaw in the same, or he can prove that the presumption is rebuttable. The check was not issued in pursuant to any legally enforceable debt or liability. Another recent judgment with regard to the maintainability of a complaint under section 138 of the Negotiable Instrument Act, as well as a complaint on the same point under section 415 and 420 IPC was also discussed by the Honorable Supreme Court, and wherein it has been held that two things have been held in two judgments. One, that if the complaint and the FIR are arising out of the same incident, both can be clubbed together, being version and cross version case, and it can be tried together and decided by the same court. And it has also held another judgment by the Honorable Supreme Court that if there is no bar to launch criminal prosecution under section 415 or 420 IPC, if the complainant can make out a case that a fraud has been committed upon him with regard to the complaint, and this has been held by the Honorable Supreme Court in Sangeeta Pain Meherchand versus State of Gujarat case. So, while dealing with the various complaints, every day different type of cases come and the different points also arise. In one of the case, before the Supreme Court was that a person has issued 4 checks, but while issuing a notice, he has given one consolidated notice as per the provisions of section 138 of the Negotiable Instrument Act, and thereafter he has filed 4 complaints. The question before the Supreme Court was whether on the basis of a single notice, all the complaints can be consolidated the answer was in negative in case of Paresh Bhai versus State of Gujarat, as it was observed by the Honorable Supreme Court in 2020, Volume 12, Supreme Court Cases, page 569, that this is Vani Agro versus State of Gujarat, 2019, that there is no provision under Section 219 of the CRPC to club such complaints on the basis of the fact that one single notice was given for the 4 different checks and 4 complaints were filed. So these are to be tried separately. Now, in recent time, you must have seen that due to this COVID-19 effect, the limitation for filing the complaint, the limitation for presentation of check and issuance of notice, that has been extended by the Honorable Supreme Court in some of the cases. One judgment is of 2020, suo motu writ petition versus regarding the cognizance of extension of time. This judgment, the Honorable Supreme Court has extended the time not only under the Negotiable Instrument Act, but also under the Arbitration and Conciliation Act and the Commercial Court Act. Another judgment on the same point is also with regard to cognizance for extension of limitations, is also 2020, Volume 9, Supreme Court Cases, page 69. And the Supreme Court has again extended the time of filing of the limitation under the Arbitration and Conciliation Act, as well as the Debt and Financial and Monetary Laws, which includes Banking Regulation Act and the Negotiable Instrument Act. One more question which arises, and practical problem which is there, is with regard to the delay, the condonation of delay in filing of the complaint. The Section 138 of the Act itself provides that if a sufficient cause is shown, the period for filing the complaint can be condoned. And this has been interpreted by the Supreme Court in 2019 judgment, that is Birinder Prasad Shah versus State of Bihar, wherein the limitation for filing the complaint under Section 138 was condoned on the ground that sufficient reasons were explained for filing the complaint. So these are the basic judgments of the recent time, though the judgments with regard to the jurisdiction, which was previously interpreted in a manner that where the banker, where the check has been presented, the limitation will be in Dashrath Ruprad Rathore case. That has been now changed with the amendment made in the provisions of the Act itself. So now the limitation part is not in dispute, and it can be very well interpreted the place of institution of the suit as per the amended provisions of the Act. Now, one question which also arises is with regard to the double jeopardy. If a complaint is filed under Section 138 of the Negotiable Instrument Act, as well as a complaint is filed or a FIR is registered under Section 420 IPC, the Supreme Court has interpreted that this will not amount to a double jeopardy, because the right under Section 138 of the Negotiable Instrument Act is with regard to dishonoring of a check, and the right with regard to a fraud committed by a person would be covered by Section 420 of the Indian Penal Code, and for that a separate prosecution will lie. Now, instead of making more academic debate, I would like to reply to any query which may be put by you with regard to the practical problems which you are facing, because recently, if you have gone through this one judgment by the Honorable Supreme Court, in which with regard to the expeditious trial, certain suggestions have been given that in number of more than 18 lakhs cases under the Negotiable Instrument Act are pending, and in majority of the cases the service of the accused is not effected. So in some cases, the Honorable Supreme Court has issued guidelines that the bank will also provide the email ID or the mobile number which has been given by the person who has issued the check so that the service can be effective. The Supreme Court has further issued guidelines that the resort should be taken frequently to section 82 and 83 of the CRPC for declaring a person as a proclaimed person if he is not appearing or is avoiding his service, and the necessary action be taken for effecting the service to the police authorities and imposing the cost with regard to that. And one judgment on this point is I'll just refer to one judgment, and there is one judgment which has not come on the statute book. It was in the newspaper only. Recently, a committee has been constituted by the Honorable Supreme Court, inviting suggestions as to how the pendency under the Negotiable Instrument Act can be reduced. So all of you can always give your valuable suggestion by way of sending mails either to the High Court or to the Honorable Supreme Court in this regard. So any questions? I would like Mr. Kapoor.
So, thank you so much for sharing your pearls of wisdom on the area, sir. I didn't know before attending this session that it's such an integrated subject where so many permutation and combinations are possible. Thank you so much for enlightening all of us on this. Sir, we have this query which is coming from one participant here, one guest here.
Yes.
The query pertains to summoning of an accused residing outside the jurisdiction of the court in check dishonor case. In such a situation, do we need to comply with mandate of section 202 CRPC, as many summoning orders being challenged on this ground, impugning the...
See, so far section 202 CRPC is concerned, that will not apply in case of the Negotiable Instrument Act, it being a summary procedure. There is a judgment. I can, if you can share email of the person, I will send it that judgment to the Supreme Court at that point.
Sir.
Because now this, if I just refer to one judgment, just a minute. I have one judgment with me, in which the Supreme Court has said that now the recognized mode of effecting service is not that the summons should be sent in person. It should be sent either on email, on WhatsApp, or through the bank. This is yes, this is the judgment. I'll just refer to that. This is a recent judgment of 2020. You can go through this judgment. 2020, Volume 4, Supreme Court Cases, pages 695. Makwana Mangaldas versus State of Gujarat. The direction has been issued that expeditious disposal of check dishonor cases need for comprehensive mechanism emphasized. Magistrate should adopt pragmatic and realistic approach while issuing process to ensure presence of the accused. It is provided that the magistrate can opt for one or many method of service, including service through speed post, courier, police office, or any other person, email, or through the courts having territorial jurisdiction, by issuance of bailable warrants and non-bailable warrants. And then coercive method should be taken under section 82 and 83 of the CRPC for declaring a person as a proclaimed person. So the alternative mode of effecting service is provided by way of email. That is why emphasis has been laid down in this judgment by the Honorable Supreme Court that the bank is responsible to provide requisite detail and facilitate the expeditious trial mandated by law. Now the court can ask the bank, give the mobile number on which has been given by the person whose check has been dishonored, give the email ID, because these are the prerequisites for opening an account or maintaining an account. So on that email ID, on that mobile number, the court can issue summons without waiting or resorting to section 202 CRPC.
So this query had come from Mr. Amit Sharon, and the next query we have.
Yes, I can send it on mail, a direct judgment that 202 will not apply.
So thank you so much for enlightening us on this. So the next query is, if an accused is convicted in two different complaints under section 138,
yes,
can the sentence so awarded run concurrently?
That's right. That's right. Now the Supreme Court says yes, it can run concurrently. That judgment is also there. Not one, there are many judgments on that point. Under Section 427 of CRPC, the Supreme Court has now done, and we in routine we are also passing the order following the judgment of the Supreme Court. I'll just request you, all the persons who are making this, they can provide if their email ID. So my legal LR will give them the judgments on the email ID, so that we can send them all the judgments which the query which they are asking for.
Thank you so much, Lord.
Yes.
Audience, once again to start posting the questions. In fact, the next query, sir, is from Mr. Prashant Rana,
Yes.
ADJ Mewat.
Yes.
Lordship, the query is, would the statement of the accused under Section 313 CRPC considered a piece of substantial evidence to rebut the presumption against the accused?
No. This is a direct judgment. I'll just give you. This is a judgment by the Supreme Court, recent judgment. This is 2020 judgment in Uttam Ram versus Devinder Singh Hoodan. The Supreme Court says that 313 statement is not a piece of evidence. It's direct judgment. I'll read it for his convenience. It says the statement of the accused under Section 313 CRPC is not a substantive evidence of defense of accused, but only an opportunity to accused to explain the incriminating circumstances appear in prosecution case of accused. This will not apply. The interpretation of 313 is clear in all the criminal cases, not even in Negotiable Instrument Act, but in other cases also. The only thing which has been interpreted by the Supreme Court is that under Section 313, if incriminating evidence has not been put to the accused, say in case of a NDPS case, if the conscious possession is not to put to an accused, that can be a defense for him that this has not been put. So the purpose of 313 statement is to tell an accused that this is the incriminating evidence which has come in the evidence of the prosecution, so that he may lead his defense evidence on those points. This is the purpose of recording a 313 statement. Now, in this case, once the presumption is there under Section 118 and 139 in favor of holder of the check, so this 313 statement is not a substantive piece of evidence as a defense under the Negotiable Instrument Act, and this is the direct judgment by the Supreme Court. This is Uttam Ram versus Devinder Singh, 2020.
Thank you, Lordship. Sir, the next query is from Mr. Manav, which is recently there was a move for decriminalization, the check bounced by government. What are your views on it, Lordship? Is 138 an unnecessary provision for just burdening the court systems?
See, as a judge, I cannot comment it because this is more the job of a legislator. But the fact remains, in fact, to some extent, the courts are also interpreting the provisions of the Negotiable Instrument Act in the broader area of the provisions of CRPC, where the big offence is having the liability of life imprisonment, or in case of more than 10 years imprisonment, where the right of an accused are looked into broader perspective by the court. But here the limited scope is, but that has been interpreted in number of cases, widening the scope of the Negotiable Instrument Act. That is why this litigation is increasing, and that is why now the Supreme Court is coming on that point only. I think my view will be the same as of the Honorable Supreme Court. In just there is a judgment by the Chief Justice 3 or 4 days ago. It has not come on the net so far because it has not been released so far, in which a committee is going to be constituted and the suggestions are invited. Of course, I will be giving my suggestion also on that point, and I'll request the learned judge also that he should also send an email and give his valuable opinion to the Supreme Court.
Thank you, Lordship. Sir, the next query is in case a complainant is not aware about the whereabouts of the accused, can substitute mode of service be adopted?
Yes, mode of service, it can be there, by way of publication, or it can be there. But now this is a problem. This is a practical problem which is being faced in number of cases. That is why in the judgment which I have quoted, the Supreme Court has noticed that 18 lakhs cases under the Negotiable Instrument Act are pending. And these cases have multiplied after 1988 amendment when this chapter 17 was introduced. Prior to that, it was only under the IPC or under the purpose, the object was at that time was that there should be a mod provided to a victim for an efficacious or a speedy trial. But with the passage of time, when the services are not being effected, so these trials are delayed. So now the suggestion given by the Honorable Supreme Court in 2020 is that if the whereabouts are not known, so if his last known number is mobile number is there, his email ID is there, then the service can be affected by that mode also. So that will be deemed to be a valid service.
Thank you, Lordship. Sir, the next query is what factors are to be taken into consideration while granting or declining compensation of 20% under Section 143A of Negotiable Instrument Act by the trial court?
So primarily the thing is the financial capacity of the accused. In many cases, it has been seen, we are seeing every day, a person is facing criminal prosecution under the Negotiable Instrument Act in number of cases. That presupposes that financially is not that sound, because nobody would like to go to jail if he's having a financial capacity to pay it. So while making the amendment under Section 143A and 148A, the limit is provided that 20% of the check amount, or in case of appeal, the 25% of the compensation that should be given. So the compensation is clearly provided. It should not be more than double of the check amount. So the magistrate who is holding the trial, who is the person who is seeing the accused person every day on every hearing, he can very well assess about his financial capacity, and because it has been held by the Supreme Court that these are directory in nature, these are not mandatory. It is not that if 20% is provided in every case, it should be given 20%. These are directory. It is the discretion of the magistrate. So it can be less than that, considering the financial condition of that person.
Thank you, Lordship. Lordship, the next query is, can proclamation through publication be effected to procure presence of the accused?
Proclamation cannot be for the purpose of presence of an accused, because that is only an procedure which is provided in the Section 82 or 83 of CRPC for declaring a person a proclaimed person. Of course, the purpose is to inform the accused that if he do not appear on a particular day within a 30 days period, which is mandatory provided under the Section 82, so he can be in almost in every case. The last resort is to issue a publication under Section 82 of CRPC for procuring the presence of a person. But normally, now with the 2020 judgment, first the court should resort to the other alternative mode of service.
Thank you, Lordship. Sir, the next query is also relevant for the current time, which says, can delay in sending legal notices from intimation of dishonor of check be condoned, as a number of such complaints are coming currently, in which the delay is due to COVID situation?
No, that COVID situation, I have said that these are the two judgments which has been taken care by the Honorable Supreme Court. That is primarily with regard to institution of the complaint, not with regard to the sending the yes. I can just give you the citation of two judgments. These will meet out the query. This one is 2020 judgment suo motu writ petition, that is writ petition number 3 of 2020, regarding cognizance for extension of limitation. In this case, only the Supreme Court said that the service of all notices, summons, and exchange of pleadings can be effected by email, fax, commonly used as instant messaging services, WhatsApp, Telegram, Signal, etc. And the second judgment with regard to extension is this is cognizance for extension of limitation. This is 2020, volume 9, Supreme Court cases, pages 468. And in this case, for the extension was granted with effect from 15th of March 2020 in terms of the earlier order, which I have referred to the first judgment. So you can go through that, but in my opinion, the notice period is not to be extended. These are primarily with regard to the filing of the complaint before the court, the limitation for filing a complaint or the filing of the appeal, that is before the court. Otherwise, also for filing of the complaint, there is section 138 itself provides a proviso that if some sufficient cause is shown, then the complaint, that delay can be controlled.
Thank you, Lordship. The next query is regarding books of accounts. After the Supreme Court ruling that account books are not relevant for trial of 138 case, now in cross-examination, objection is taken when defense counsel seeks production of account books by complainant. Can this objection be allowed or not?
No, it cannot be allowed. For two reasons. One, when the defense evidence starts of an accused person, he can always summon the relevant witness of the complainant. Suppose it is a case of say given in a case of a commission agent, the account books are maintained, or in case of a bank, some books of accounts are maintained, or a society. Then if an application, because normally now these are the all tactics which have been adopted. When I say that the general principles of section 311 or section 319 CRPC, those are being introduced under the summary proceedings of the Negotiable Instrument Act, then the scope is widened. So to keep these proceedings as summary proceedings, the court will go with the presumption under section 118 and 139 of the Negotiable Instrument Act that yes, there is a presumption in favor of the holder of the check. So books of account or the proceeding books, these are not to be produced like a civil court. They're not one. There are many judgments of 2020 coming on that point. So this cannot be allowed. In recent, we have noticed that even 319 application for summoning an additional accused is filed under the, especially in case of a company, that so-and-so director is left out. Now we want to summon him additionally. Those have been it has been settled by the Supreme Court that this cannot be done. In case of DK Chandel case, 2008. So the court will go with a presumption that there is a presumption in favor, and rebuttal is to be done by the accused. So when an accused, while cross-examination of a complainant, wants that the account book should be produced or not, it is for the complainant. If we do not want to produce, the court will draw a presumption against him, or it will draw a presumption in his favor. So it will be open for the defense, the accused, while leading his defense evidence, he can summon any witness. Otherwise, it will be opening a Pandora box that like a civil court, you are asking for everything. This should be produced. This should be produced. It is for the complainant. Whatever evidence you want to produce, you can produce it. That's all. These applications should be dismissed, in my opinion.
Thank you, Lordship. The next query, Lordship, is what would be the liability where check is taken by the bank from accused?
Yes, that is there. That is why this is one judgment. Suppose take an instance. What the bank people do in normal practice, everybody knows that they take 10 checks, 15 checks, or 20 checks, and as and when there is a default, this is coming more in case of the private companies which are financing the vehicles. They take advance checks, 10 checks, 15 checks. So what they do is, as and when there is a default, they will use the check for the entire period. This is what the Supreme Court has interpreted. No, the check can be used only for that particular period, not for the whole loan amount.
Sir, the query was further extending to the SARFAESI Act, sir. Whether we can have two complaints initialized on the same factor, one under section 138, one under SARFAESI Act, both together.
That judgment now has been interpreted by a larger bench of the Supreme Court, which I was just the first instance I have given. This judgment is this is 2021 Supreme Court Cases Online, page 152, P. Mohan Raj versus Shah Brothers. And all these acts have been considered, including the IRB and the cases where the Supreme Court has said that if there is a specific provision under the act that no prosecution will lie till the pendency of the proceedings before that particular act. Like in this case, it has been held that once a moratorium order has been passed under section 14 of the code, then the complaint will not lie. Now the question, there is a clear rider in that case that this will apply only in case of a corporate debtor against a company, but for the personal liability, the complaint will lie. So this will apply in all the cases. This is a very detailed and reasoned judgment. Just recently, this has come, I think, just 15 days ago. So you can go through this judgment. This covers each and every aspect of this, the liability vis-a-vis NI Act or any other proceeding under the commercial acts.
Thank you, Lordship. Lordship, the next query is from Mr. Vineet Narang, CJM Barnala. He is posting the question, please guide us whether the limitation for the period of service in legal notice upon the accused can also be condoned now by virtue of the order of Honorable Supreme Court.
No, I don't think so.
Legal notice upon the accused can also be condoned.
No. Notice cannot be condoned. It is only the filing of the complaint which has been given. That is there. That is there. The Supreme Court judgment is very clear about that. In one judgment, the Supreme Court says that there is no such provision of extending the notice. There are 2-3 judgments which have come. This cannot be extended. This has been held in Criminal Writ Petition number 3 of 2020 regarding cognizance of extension of limitation. It says no extension of the validity under the Negotiable Instrument Act can be granted. So the only thing is with regard to the filing of the complaint. I would request all the judges to go through all the 3 judgments on this point, which I have referred to that.
Thank you, Lordship. The next effect in legal notice, check amount, where whole debt amount is mentioned larger than the check amount will be sufficient to throw out the case of complaint.
Yes, that is there. There's a direct judgment of the Supreme Court on that point. I have just referred to that, and that judgment is yes, this is the judgment. Now I'll just give you the citation of that judgment, which the Supreme Court has interpreted. This is 2019 judgment, Vijay Gopal Lohar versus Pandurang Ramchandar. It says that the notice can be issued only for the check amount and not for any other amount more than the check amount, and that the proceedings were held to be bad in the eyes of law.
Thank you, Lordship. The next is a very interesting query by one anonymous, I think, guest. A person issued a check under his signature from the other person's account having similar name. During the trial, he took defense that he was not the holder of said account. He proved it, and it is also proved that he signed the said check. Could he be convicted under Section 138 or a complaint under Section 420 IPC is to be filed by the
will be a case under Section 420. It is a case under Section 420. The judgment which I have referred to, where the Supreme Court said that yes, 420 complaint can also be filed. If a person says that some cheating is there, this is a case of Sangeeta Ben Meherchand Patel versus State of Gujarat. And it says that it cannot be a double jeopardy. Later on, that person cannot say that I have been acquitted in 139, 138 complaints, so I cannot be prosecuted under Section 420. This will not be a double jeopardy. He can be prosecuted and convicted under Section 420.
Thank you, Lordship. The next query is if parties enter into settlement before mediation in case under section 138 but fail to adhere to perform it, what are the options available with the trial court?
See, this is a recent judgment again on this set point. The Supreme Court has said that when a settlement is arrived at before a mediator or a Lok Adalat, it amounts to a decree of a civil court. So the remedies available to a person is, suppose a second check is given. In this case, what happened? There was a complaint pending before the court. The matter was referred to a mediator, to the Lok Adalat, where some settlement was arrived at and a new check was issued in pursuance thereof. That check also bounced. So the question before the Supreme Court was what will be the right or what will be the liability of the accused person. So the Supreme Court says the complainant has two rights. On civil side, he can go to the civil court, execute that award of the by way of recovering that amount. And for the second check which has been dishonored, he can file a independent complaint also. He can again prosecute the defaulter. This judgment is for a reference. I'll give you. This is
Arun Kumar versus Anita Mishra and others.
Yes, this is judgment is Arun Kumar versus Anita Mishra. This is of 2019 judgment, exactly covering the same point.
Thank you, Lordship. Lordship, the next query here is how to enforce appearance of a company in section 138 case. Can company be declared proclaimed offender? Mr. Viren from Panchkula.
In fact, the company under section 141 is a legal entity. Proceedings can be initiated, but it has to be sued through a director who is in charge of the same. So the proclamation will be issued against the director only, because that is the person who is the company. You cannot sue a company without impleading it through a director. Ultimately, it has to be served through a director only. The service is to be effected to a director who is in charge of day-to-day business. So the proclamation for declaring him a proclaimed offender or a proclaimed person, that has to be against the director only.
Accused fails to make payment of interim compensation under section 143A, then what orders we are supposed to?
The court can pass a conditional order of dismissal of the complaint. It can pass an order, sorry, not for dismissal of the complaint. It can pass an order of sending in judicial custody for non-compliance of the same, like any other order passed by the magistrate.
Thank you, Lordship. The next.
Normally, what happened in appeal, a conditional order is passed. Say in 148, suppose an order is passed that he has been granted bail. The appeal comes against a judgment of conviction. So while granting suspension of sentence, the court passes a conditional order that you pay 20% of the amount, your bail bond will be accepted within a period of 1 month, whatever time is given. Suppose he failed to make the payment, then his bail bond will be forfeited and he will be taken in custody. That is the penal provision for not making the payment, interim payment.
Lordship, thank you. The next query is when the compensation is awarded to complainant, how he can recover the same? It is as it is not paid on the day. When compensation is awarded to complainant, how he can recover the same as it is not paid on the day of judgment?
See, the procedure will be the same. Presume it that a complaint is finally decided, not in case of interim compensation. The court passes an order, there is a check of, take an example, check of 1 lakh rupees. The court decides that it convicts a person that he has failed to make the payment of 1 lakh rupees and award additional amount compensation of rupees 1 lakh. So amount becomes 2 lakh of rupees. So if that is not, then the areas of land revenue or by attaching the property, it can recover the amount. Otherwise, he will be facing the prosecution for that. because for non-payment, you have to put another clause that if we fail to pay the compensation, fine or cost, then the court normally passes an order that beyond the period of 2 years, which is the maximum punishment provided, it can be said that he can undergo further punishment of 6 months or 3 months or whatever is there. So in criminal cases, when a cost or fine is imposed or compensation is awarded, so the recovery procedure will always remain the same. The court, by way of areas of land revenues and attachment of the property of the said person.
Thank you, Lordship. The next query is also interesting. It says, if complainant and accused enter into compromise in court and complainant insists to put a condition in compromise that if accused fails to make payment as per compromise, he has the right to revive the complaint from the stage where it is pending. What should trial court do? Next query is, what will be the liability of a person who gives check to the person with his account for debt of another partner?
No, there are two things. One is with regard to a conditional settlement between two persons, the accused and the complainant, with a rider that if the payment is not made within a specified time as per the settlement, whether it can be revived, that is possible. If the condition of the settlement says so that it can be revived, so the court can only simply adjourn it sine die. Instead of disposing of the complaint, the court can say that the complaint stands adjourned sine die or give a longer date for the same so that the same is. But even in case of a conditional order, if the court passes an order that in case of a default, the complainant has a right to revive, then it can be revived. You cannot say that the prosecution cannot be revived in that manner, because the order passing the deciding the complaint will itself be a conditional order.
Thank you, Lordship. The next query is from Mr. Neeraj Goyal, Khanna. If accused is directed by the trial court to pay compensation under section 143A, but he does not pay, then what is further to be done? Whether any adverse orders to be passed against the accused, or what is the next step?
That is the same. I think earlier also somebody has asked, because that for that the proceedings are there. See, in case of an appeal and 148, there the sword lies hang on the neck of the accused, because there is a conditional order. If you don't pay, your bail will be cancelled and you will be sent back. But in case of an interim compensation, if the same is not paid, the court can only insist upon attachment of the property of the accused. That's all. Till the time the case is decided.
Thank you, Lordship. We still have many questions. The next query is coming from Harpreet K. Jeevan. Lordship, what factors should be taken into consideration while passing an order of stay in appeal, and what conditions would be appropriate to be imposed?
See, as I said, that the Supreme Court has held that these are directory in nature. So considering the financial status of an accused person, if he is in a position to pay, so this 20% clause is just, I say that in appeal, the court has more powers to put a condition that if you do not make the payment, your bail bond will be cancelled and you will be sent back to undergo the sentence which has been awarded by the trial court. So that is why a safeguard has been given that you pay some amount, you shell out some amount from your pocket, say 20% or 25% as per the provisions of the Act. So the term and condition, this is always for the court. It may not pass any order, because if the conditional order is passed, then it has to be, in case of a violation, it has to be followed and the bail bond will be cancelled. The criteria is only what is the financial condition of the accused person. If he is that poor that he is not in a position to pay, then the court has to look into the other aspect, find out, because in High Court what we do is, frankly speaking, in the stage when a person is convicted and he is not in a position to pay, two courts have held that he is liable to undergo a punishment of 2 years and pay an amount of 1 lakh rupees. I am giving an example, and amount of 1 lakh rupees, which is the check amount, and additional amount of 1 lakh rupees, which is the compensation. but he is not in a position to pay. What you do? Either you will not grant the suspension of sentence, ask him, you continue in the judicial custody, and then you ask the accused as a court or as a presiding officer, sorry, the complainant, you ask the complainant that you reduce your amount if you can, some settlement can be arrived at, because by using your good sense, you can always convince the complainant that instead of asking for 1 lakh rupees, he may ask for 50,000 rupees or some less amount, which as per the financial capacity the accused can pay. In High Court, we are doing everything, because complainant knows that if 6 months imprisonment is there and the accused has undergone that 6 months imprisonment, he will not be able to recover even a single penny. So he is interested in money. So it is all about your management in the court as a presiding officer, how you can manage the things. These are the only to be seen in case of individual person. See, if a person has a financial capacity to make the payment, he would never like to go behind the bars. He would not like that for a check bounce case, he will like to pay. He will definitely come to some settlement and say that, all right, I'll pay this much of amount and settle the dispute. So this is to be seen in individual case, not as a general criteria.
Thank you, Lordship. Another interesting query here is that whether the judicial magistrate first class can impose fine more than rupees 10,000 under section 138 of NI Act.
In 138, the punishment, the fine is, it is only 10,000. Not, it should not be less, more than that. Whatever the Act provides, you cannot go beyond that.
Thank you, Lordship. Can the cases be compounded by the trial court on the request of the parties after the conviction orders have been passed?
Yes, that is 143A and 148 provides so. Now, in earlier there was a judgment, as I said, that in 2015, Damodar S. Prabhu case in Supreme Court, wherein similar provision was there that some cost be imposed on that person who has been convicted. But now the the basic thing or the basic concept under the Negotiable Instrument Act, where a check is bounced, is that the accused in 90% cases is not in a position to make the payment. In 10% cases, there are cases where he is going to set up a case that I have some settlement of account is there and all that. So the criteria is only this, that the offense can be compounded as per the amended provisions of the Act, and no cost can be imposed because to finish off the litigation.
Another very simple query here is, can A issue check for liability of B?
For that, the Supreme Court has now said no. I think I'm not sure about that particular judgment, because the question is, the interpretation is legally enforceable debt or liability. That has to be with regard to the person who is making the, who is issuing the check. I mean, third party right under section 138 are not protected. Third party rights are protected in a case of bill of exchange, but not in case of a check.
So, sir, we still have, I think, a long list and queue of unpublished queries here, and your Lordship has already given, I think, sufficient time. Would you like us to continue for a few more minutes, or as the Lordship suggests, because this session is also being recorded? We can continue, sir.
You can continue. Nothing.
So, sir, once the legal notice given, can check be represented again, and after the dishonor, again legal notice can be given for the purpose of limitation?
You see, this point is covered by the Supreme Court judgment that the check can be again presented, but legal notice can be given only once. From that, the limitation will start. But the check is to be represented within the period of its validity. I mean, suppose a check is given on 1st January 2020, the validity is 6 months. It will expire on 1st of July 2020. So in that period, the check can be presented before the bank more than once. But once you have given a notice, then you cannot represent the check for the purpose of limitation. That is the only difference. Otherwise, the check can be presented for that period, and that from that the limitation will start.
For the extension of.
So the next query is also very interesting. The query is whether section 319 of CRPC is applicable for summoning of the other partner of the firm in case when the authorized signatory of the firm is dead and the other partner is managing the conduct of the business after him.
See, this will this 319 part. I have just during my discussion also have said that everything, the limitation or the summoning, that is revolving around the issuance of a legal notice. There are cases where a company is arrayed as an accused, but notice is not given to the company and only to the director. The Supreme Court says that the prosecution is bad. The second is whether the notice is given to A or B. The question, as in your case, is that now one B has died or A has died, then can C be summoned as an additional accused under section 319 CRPC? Again, the Supreme Court has said no, it cannot be done, because the notice, it is to be seen to whom the notice was given. Limitation would start from that notice only. So subsequently adding an accused, that will be extending the period of litigation of filing the complaint, because an accused has to be implemented in a complaint within the period which is prescribed after the notice is given. So under 319, this cannot be done.
Issued for 10 lakhs, whether the complainant has advanced 10 lakhs in cash. Defense states that he had received only 1 lakh. Check was issued for 10 lakhs. Whether the complainant is still required to prove his financial capacity.
That's right. That's right. This now financial capacity is now Supreme Court is saying that in case of cash, because under the RBI guidelines, you cannot make the payment more than 10,000 or 20,000 in cash. For that, he has to prove his financial capability. That is there. Not one. There are many judgments. I can cite. I can give you one judgment on that point. This one judgment is of 2019, Basalingappa versus Mudisappa. This is of 2019 by the Supreme Court on this point. And the second is more relevant, that is APX Forex Services Private Limited versus Shakti International. This is 2020 judgment, volume 12, Supreme Court cases, pages 24.
Thank you, Lordship. I think the next query is what remedy available with complainant if a non-CTS check is issued by accused? I'm not sure. CTS. Non-CTS check is.
The remedy, see, under civil law, the remedy is always for all the promissory note, all the negotiable instrument, including the check. You can always file a civil suit for recovery where you cannot prosecute a person under section 138 or 148 of the 141 of the Negotiable Instrument Act. Then the remedies under the civil law, you can always prove it that yes, the loan is there. Say in given case where a person is not able to prove his payment of advancement, he can always file a suit by leading the evidence that yes, this is the evidence and the person is liable under general law. The civil liability will always be there.
Thank you, Lordship. Next query, Lordship, is in an agreement between parties that in case of dispute, parties shall go before the arbitration and incorporated arbitration clause in the agreement. But complainant instead of going to the arbitrator as filed 138 complaint, accused moved the application for staying the proceedings because of the arbitration clause.
Now this will be this for this I'll just
have the recourse in such.
yes, for that I have already said that now all these points these are covered by this the recent 2021 judgment in P. Mohan Ras, in which number of earlier judgments have been overruled by the Supreme Court, interpreting that where the under the commercial law some proceedings are pending, then 141 may or may not apply, or what will be the liability of individual or the company. I would request all of you to go through this. This is a very relevant judgment. This is 2020 SEC Online, page 152, P. Mohan Raj case. You will find number of queries which or the points which arises due in the day-to-day working of the courts while dealing with the Negotiable Instrument Act cases. So this proceedings can be stayed if some valid cases. Mr. Kapoor, your voice is muted.
My apologies, Lordship. The query was in a complaint. In case a company is not initially included, can it be included later as an amendment?
No, that will not be. You can only the Supreme Court say that only some clerical mistake, if some name is incorrectly mentioned, that can be done, but not that a new party can be added, because the limitation to file a complaint or everything, it revolves around the provisions of section 138, how the notice is to be given within 30 days of dishonoring of the check, and then within 30 days, and then the payment is to be made within 15 days thereafter, then another 30 days is the period for filing of the complaint. You cannot substitute it, or you cannot add a new party after the complaint is filed. And same analogy will apply in case of 319 CRPC, when some application is moved that so and so be substituted or so and so be implemented as accused. That will not, because it is a criminal liability. It is not a civil suit. In a civil suit, you can always amend, you can always add any person within the period of subject to the law of limitation. You can do that, but not in case of a criminal prosecution. Say, of course, there is a vicarious liability provided under section 141 of the Act, where for the liability of a company, the directors are also held liable. But under the general law of general criminal law, it is the liability of an accused only. There is no such vicarious liability under IPC except in commercial cases or in the financial cases.
Lordship, if the legal notice has been returned unserved, can presumption of service be drawn and
Yes.
can summoning order be passed?
Yes, it can be. If it is sent to a recognized mode, say if you have sent it through a registered post, you have a postal receipt, or you have sent through an email and you have an receipt of the mail that it has been delivered, then you can proceed further and summoning order can be passed.
Lordship, I still have lots of queries in pipeline, and in fact,
holiday for me, it's nothing.
I am feeling guilty that you've been continuously speaking for such a long period of 1.5 hours. So, sir, I'll take 2-3 more queries with your permission. And then, in fact, I'll also like to inform the audience that more such queries can be sent to the Chandigarh Judicial Academy on the email IDs of Director Academics.
Yes.
And in fact, the
if those queries come to me, I'll reply them. I can reply them if the queries through Judicial Academy
probably were answered initially in the session itself by the Honorable Lordship, because he had request your guidance. Next query: if check issued for liability of another is it not an acknowledgement of liability? This again, I think, is already answered in by
That's
way
right.
of some.
It is the liability of the accused person. It is not the acknowledgement of liability of a third party, like in a case of bill of exchange. In case of check, in my opinion, it cannot be.
Lordship, in fact, the rest of the queries, and one more query which is very interesting here is the legal notice only to the company and no name of the directors is mentioned in the complaint. Is the complaint maintainable? When is legal notice is only to company through its director, but no name of the director is mentioned in the legal notice. Mentions the same in the complaint, then the complaint is maintainable.
No, if the responsible person or the director in charge of the day-to-day business, if he is not given a notice or his name is not mentioned, then it will not be a proper service of the notice, and the complaint will not be maintainable. There are judgment on that point also. I think covering those judgments right now, I can, if you ask them, everyone to give their query on to the Chandigarh Judicial Academy, I'll give them a reply. I'll get all these queries forwarded to me, and I'll give them a reply.
Lordship, I think there are more queries, but
Yes.
I think some of these queries are kind of repeat of the earlier ones,
Yes.
and some of these are very interesting and very long one. I think one query is running into almost 2 pages. So I think reading the query, in fact, with due apologies to Mr. Ashwini Gupta, who has written a very long query. I think we will request.
I again request all the judicial officers that they should send their query by way of email. So the academy will forward it to me, and I'll give reply to all of them.
So thank you so much. In fact, and again, once again, our sincere apologies for having the technical glitches in the beginning to start with. We got delayed in starting the
I
session.
would like to thank you, Mr. Aman from Chandigarh Judicial Academy, and my colleague, Mr. J.P. Ratra. He's a Senior Deputy Advocate General Punjab. He has given me a very good assistance in providing all this material and data to me. So all the judicial officers, they can send their query to Chandigarh Judicial Academy, and I'll get back to you by way of sending a reply and the relevant judgment of the Supreme Court on that point, so that you can proceed further. Okay, thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Kapoor. Mr. Abhishek.
Thank you so much, Lordship. Thank you on behalf of Chandigarh Judicial Academy,
you,
on
Lordship.
behalf of SSC Online, and on behalf of all the participants who, in fact, have immensely benefited with your wisdom and pearls of, I think, wisdom and knowledge. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. With your permission, Lordship, we will need your permission to close the session now.
Yes, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Lordship.
It was a healthy discussion. Very